And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick here with Alix Steel, taking you through that closing bell with the global simulcast that starts right now. Scarlet Fu in the TV studio, as always. In the radio booth today, though, Carol Massar and Tim Stenovic on assignment. Matt Miller fill in those shoes. I'm not sure if you're filling in Tim's shoes or Carol's shoes, but Norah Mulinda will fill the shoes of the other as we welcome our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms. Matt, here on a day where we're seeing modest declines as we head towards the close.
Yeah, really very little change, right? The S&P down to 0.1%. And I was taking a look back to see how we've done this week. Also, very little change for the week. Very little change since April 2nd. We're basically unchanged at that 56.60 level since Liberation Day. Still off about 3% for the year, 1% since the election. But the S&P really hasn't done as much as maybe we would have expected it to after Donald Trump won the presidency back in November.
And if we're looking here on Friday, I mean, we're seeing energy is the best performing sector in the S&P 500 that we've been seeing, and real estate following right after.
You know what has moved a lot since April 2nd is the U.S. dollar. The Bloomberg dollar index down about 3.5%. So as much as we've seen the U.S. stock market, go down by a lot, make this sharp recovery and kind of just sit there at those levels, the U.S. dollar has been hit hard, and it'll be taking center stage this weekend as well.
Not to harp on it, but it's really hard for me to take any equity moves very seriously when there could be a lot of mechanical buying. I was mentioning earlier that Citi says if you have a swing under 2%, you have volatility-controlled funds have to buy equities.
Absolutely here, and you get the closing bells here in New York. An interesting day here, too. We talk about this idea of tight trading ranges. We talk about this idea of lower volume. You put that all together, and the net effect of it all is basically unchanged on the day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average takes a while for these numbers to settle, but it's down about 100 points, or about 0.3% here on the day. The S&P 500 lower by about 4 points, or less than 0.1% on the day. The NASDAQ Composite, we're just going to call that unchanged. Similar story for the NASDAQ 100, while the Russell 2000 giving up about 3.5 points on the day, or down about 0.2%.
Yeah, and we're looking at a drop of about 0.5% on the week, by the way, to 56.60 here on the S&P. The breadth is pretty unchanged as well. We have 239 stocks finishing up, 260 stocks finishing down, and then 4 unchanged, so more than 500 in the S&P 500.
All right, let's take a look at the sectors, and this is our IMAP. A pretty mixed day here. Energy was the best performers, gaining more than 1% as WTI climbs above $60 a barrel once again, hitting a high of 61. You also have gains in real estate investment trusts and consumer discretion, but these are fairly modest advances. On the flip side, healthcare and staples are among the decliners. These are your classically defensive sectors, down about 1.1% and 0.6%, respectively.
Just want a headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal right now for our viewers and listeners in the New York area. Newark Liberty Airport. This is in Newark, New Jersey, which has been facing a series of flight delays, largely because of staffing issues when it comes to air traffic controllers. We're now learning that the FAA here in the United States is weighing a broad pullback in the number of flights that can go into and out of Newark because of some of these radar issues. Remember, there were reports this morning of at least a 90-second radar outage that occurred at that airport. According to people familiar with the matter that our Bloomberg reporters have spoken to, U.S. aviation officials now plan to meet further on further flight cutbacks at Newark Liberty Airport, just across the river there in New Jersey.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, a couple gainers that I'm keeping an eye on here on this Friday. I'm looking at microchip technology. Now, this is a chip maker. It's about $29 billion market cap here. And it said that the period marks the bottom of a prolonged industry downward cycle. Now, we are hearing Bank of America, they upgraded the stock to neutral from underperform. As we're really looking through these earnings, it's really lifting shares of other peers like Texas Instruments, On Semiconductor, and Analog Devices. They all rose at the close. And we did have microchip technology up about 12%, 13% to end the day. But also looking at Lyft, I mean, when we think about its competitors, Uber didn't really live up to expectations as we saw those earnings and broke them down. But Lyft did. I mean, its earnings were resilient. The company has really been keeping a lot of those activist investors away. And people are really just saying that this is a resilient company and it's doing well because if you look at the stock, I mean, slightly cheaper than that big name Uber. And some people like to arbitrage. So
were you not surprised by this 28% jump in the stock.
I mean, it's really a
That's
remarkable
insane.
number,
Yeah.
28%.
The valuation is so low
Yeah.
compared to some of its peers.
Yeah.
Mandeep Singh was saying, look, it's not going to take a lot to move that needle.
Right.
Well, I certainly saw that.
But
Are,
hey,
are you an Uber or Lyft person, Alex?
Yes. You got to arbitrage
So you don't? I don't arbitrage.
You got to arbitrage it.
I'm loyal.
I would go with the more
Yeah.
affordable option, which is Lyft.
You got to arbitrage.
Definitely
right.
cheaper.
I arbitrage. But also, as we're looking at another name, I've got eyes on Yelp. Now, this is a website that I personally
Is
love
Yelp
to check.
still around, really?
I mean, it is. It's around and it's on my phone. Okay,
Wow.
Romaine, it's on my phone. When I go
Look
out
at
to
that.
eat,
Take that,
I
old
check
man.
it out before I order my food. But this is something I like to really look at. But we're seeing these first quarter results that beat expectations. The company raised the high end of its full year forecast for
Yeah.
adjusted EBITDA, and we're really seeing shares getting a pop off of that news. Yelp shares up about 9%
Yeah.
at the close here.
Just real quickly, though, too, I do want to go back to that breaking news on the FAA. We actually now starting to see movement in some of the share prices, including United Airlines, which has an outsized presence at Newark Liberty Airport. Those shares now down, Matt, about 3% here in the after-hours trade. We're going to get you some more details on that, but we'll get back to some of the gainers and decliners.
Yeah, I mean, we can get back to the Newark story in a second as well, because Nora and I were talking about that before we came to you, and I think how bad is it for the U.S. economy if people are afraid to fly? Probably the best thing for officials to do is say, it's not all airlines and it's not the entire U.S. airspace. It's just Newark, in the armpit of America there. So if they blame it on Newark and stop that, maybe people will still fly a LaGuardia.
And we should point out, I mean, the airlines have been actually asking for a bit of a pullback for a while in Newark. So even before these current issues cropped up over the last few weeks. So it'll be interesting, too. I should point out, again, just citing our Bloomberg reporters here, 68% of the departures out of Newark actually are on United. So maybe that's why you're seeing such an outsized move in the shares here in the after-hours trade.
Yeah, I mean, it's down over 1%, and also during the trading session, it was down 4%. I mean, it's United Hub, so that's a big deal for that airline, Matt.
Yeah, only nonstop flight from New York to Berlin out of Newark. Let me get to some of these decliners. One of them is airline related, but the first is not. Akamai was at least one of the biggest losers in the S&P 500 in percentage terms. The company absolutely decimated, losing more than a tenth of its value after its results kind of underline the problems that they have. JP Morgan says we remain cognizant of the debt level, of the slow top line growth, of the margin pressures. And this is a company that, delivers content to you via the internet, and they're having a problem doing that. Expedia is another one that I want to talk about. And this is obviously the airline related. Although the kids tell me that
it's your demo.
Only old people use Expedia. It's my go-to.
You said that, not
right?
me.
And it makes sense because
Gen
of my
X
age.
tool alert.
They missed results in the first quarter, and then their outlook also disappointed for the second quarter. Weaker than expected domestic travel, weaker than expected inbound travel because fewer people are flying
Why are you still using Expedia, Matt?
I don't know, because I'm 51 years old. In any case,
wow, you're old. Wow.
The stock, though the stock has underperformed the S&P year to date and is down today, it's outperformed over the last 5 years. I will say it's up 126%. So it's been a winner over the last 5 years, and hopefully that's the case with me as well. Finally, Compass, it's a digital real estate company. First quarter adjusted EBITDA missed earnings in terms of loss per share and overshadows a boost to its annual forecast. I will say in terms of Compass, I normally anchor Bloomberg Open Interest every weekday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Bloomberg Television.
Look at that.
We have the CEO of Compass, Robert Refkin, with us on my program on Monday morning. So remember that over the weekend.
Amazing.
Every
time. Every time
There's
he's
something
in
else
these
going
hours,
on
he
this
does
weekend,
that.
though.
Yes, the trade stuff. Okay, let's go to the bond market. Nothing happened. All right, moving on. Let's go back to the Newark stuff here. And so this is actually a really big deal. I'm already back to the FAA story.
Yeah,
They're like,
we're
there's
all
nothing. No,
keep
we're talking
going,
about
Alex.
the bond
Keep
market.
going, Alex.
So this is a really big deal because also if you divert flights, if you need to like LaGuardia and Kennedy, what does that wind up looking like?
Well,
for the
they can't
Northeast?
take us extra.
There's no capacity there.
Totally.
But this gets to the question as to whether now you're going to start to see a more material impact on people avoiding that airport. And I flew out of there just a few weeks ago, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
How was it?
It was fine. I personally didn't experience any delays, but there's been a lot of talk amongst people basically saying that they have seen a drop off in activity at the airport as I guess people look for alternatives.
Yeah, and I wonder if the flights out of, let's say, JFK or LaGuardia are going to get more expensive as a result, because all of it is dynamic pricing on websites like Expedia or even the airline's own websites.
Or to your point, if you wind up paring back flights in Newark, do the Newark flights wind up getting more expensive?
Yeah, and this gets to this idea, too, of what sort of the government response is going to be. We're talking about really a lot of changes taking place right now with the Federal Aviation Administration, and the idea that they have to address some of these, I guess, workforce issues, if you will. There was a great report in the New York Times just a few days ago that talked about the number of air traffic controllers that are actually working full time there relative to the number that would be, and it is a fraction of what it was even just a year ago, and that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, and they work out of Philadelphia. They don't even work out of the New York area. So that's another thing. And that was all a matter of not just cutting costs, but also accounting for the fact that the cost of living in places like New York City, Long Island is way too expensive for a lot of the folks who work there.
By the way, cutting costs is the problem here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these people hold our lives in their hands. You got to pay the women and men who are moving tin more, especially in this market. You want the best and brightest doing that kind of job, right? You don't want the losers who have to live in a town hours away.
High stakes.
I have to say that I called this must-watch TV, and I mean that. I watch this every day, the closed simulcast, so it's an honor to be with you.